For years, I was teaching other businesses how to understand their customers so they could grow their business. Meanwhile, I had no idea how to make what I did relevant to the people outside of my existing network to grow my business. And despite building a six-figure business, almost every penny of it came from people who already knew me. The moment I tried to reach beyond my network, nothing really connected, and it cost me more than revenue. It cost me projects that weren't really lighting me up. It cost me self-confidence, despite being very competent, and it cost me peace of mind. Now, the answer was in this book, Value Proposition Design. Now, the irony is that I'd been applying it for years when I worked with clients, and I hadn't really applied any of it for my own business. So in this video, what I'm going to do is walk you through what I did wrong in what I now call the inside out approach to designing your offers and why it keeps brilliant people stuck. The second thing we'll do is I'll share what this book taught me, and I'll translate that into what I've termed the transformation spectrum. And finally, I'll share with you the Big Five framework, which I developed to help design offers from the outside in so that your ideal clients recognize that your offer is for them before even describing what you do to help them achieve the results that they want. So let's start out with what's wrong with the inside out approach. Because most coaches, consultants, facilitators build their offers the wrong way round. And they might not even realize it. Well, at least I know that was true for me, and I have seen it in others. Because the default move is to lead with your credentials or your methodology framework, essentially your IP, the thing that you have that's uniquely yours that delivers value to your clients. And or you might talk about your delivery vehicles, the workshops, the coaching sessions, that type of stuff. You're essentially dressing up your CV as an offer. And even if you're not describing it as an offer, you do see things like alphabet soup after people's names that try to indicate their credentials and how good they are. And you must work with me because look at all this training and certificates I've got. Now, don't get me wrong, those are really important to develop your craft, but this is what I call inside out thinking. You start with you and your skills, and you work outwards to try and figure out how you can help people. Now, I remember going into discovery calls, playing you tell me about your business, I'll tell you about my business as like essentially the agenda, and then we'll see if there's a way that we can work with each other. And I remember doing that, especially when I first went solo. I was in my early 30s. I really felt like I needed to prove myself and give that CV dressed up as an offer. And essentially I was asking, does any of what I do sound like something that you need or you want? And here's a twist. This approach does work, but only for people that already know you. And why it works is because when people already know you, they have seen you in action. And when they've seen you in action, they know what you are capable of. And when they know what they're capable of, they know the value that you can bring. And so they trust you before they even buy a service. And that's because when it comes to how you experience this, is that you are making an assumption that your skills speak for themselves. And then you expect your reputation and track record to do the selling. And so you ultimately then end up leading with your expertise because you know what they need, but you might not know exactly what they want. That's later on in this video, we'll be talking about that. And all of this because there is that familiarity. Familiarity. My handwriting's really bad. That you've built up that forms a foundation of trust. So those conversations that you're having, where you're talking about your business, they talk about their business, you're essentially filling in the gaps around what you do nowadays compared to when they last interacted with you, and you're brainstorming opportunities, which I don't know about you, I love those conversations. They feel really generative. You create these proposals, they get signed off really easily, you do great work, and then it's really easy to fall into this inside out thinking blueprint. But this fails with everybody else because strangers don't know you. So you've got to flip your thinking because when it comes to trust up here, where people don't have that familiarity with you, you will want to do what you can to make them recognize that you understand their world so well that they feel seen before you say a single word. And that is really about making sure that you understand their context. And you'll want to also articulate the change that they seek in their lives, whether it's work or personal lives, using their language, not yours. Now, I have probably another video in me about jargon that we as coaches and facilitators and consultants use. But essentially, what you want to do is make your value relevant. And because I haven't seen you in action, you want to show proof that you solve their problems with evidence. And you'll want the action for them to want to work with you really simple. So you build your offer around a specific person with a specific problem. Precision. And you are still here, down here in the middle circle, because it does really matter who you are and what you can do. But instead of working from the inside out, you're working from the outside in. So often, it's not your services that are the problem, it's the direction that you're building your offer from that is. So, how do you solve this then? Well, it comes back to this book, Value Proposition Design. Now, it's from the same people that brought you Business Model Generation. This is the more well known book. I remember getting this back in 2011. I was deep into drinking the Kool-Aid for design thinking. I was organizing education hackathons. And a few years later, they brought out this in 2014 because quite a lot of people were getting confused around how to design value propositions. Now, the funny thing is, I didn't actually look at this book properly until 2020, 2021. It's kind of early in the pandemic. And for those of you that actually haven't seen the diagram, the business model canvas is a way of mapping out how an organization delivers value to its customers. And this particular book, Value Proposition Design, is drilling into two parts of it. Obviously, the value proposition, but also the customer segment and the customer profile that helps you figure out what the value proposition is for them. And that's what I want to show you right now, because when it comes to customer segment, there's three areas that you consider. And they are the jobs that your customers are trying to get done in their work or their lives. Now, when I say job, I don't literally mean their job, but it's like the tasks, the actions, the stuff they just need to do. And whether they are able to do them well or not will determine the pains or gains. So if they can't do the job, then they're going to experience some sort of pain or pains. If they do successfully complete the job, then they experience some gains. And the point of a value proposition design is to map the pains, gains, and jobs to be done to your delivery. So back to the irony. I'd been teaching this concept to other businesses, being customer centric, empathy mapping, understanding the people you seek to serve before you design anything for them. And like I said, I just wasn't doing it for myself. And that was the reframe that helped me shift everything, because I stopped thinking, what can I offer? And started asking, what is this person trying to do as a way of either escaping from something, the pain, and or trying to achieve something, the gain. This is the difference between inside out thinking, starting with you and your skills and working outwards, and outside in thinking, where you start with your client's world and work backwards to see what you can do. Now, this is essentially product market fit conversation, and that's a shift. It's simple to say, but it is genuinely hard to do when you've spent all of your last few years building the other way around. And also when you're such an expert and you know what your clients need to want to sell that to them. But that's not always what they want. So what does this outside in approach actually look like in practice? Now, in the value proposition design book, they talk about pains and gains and jobs to be done in that circle, with the segmented circle. But honestly, I find it easier to think about pains and gains as part of a spectrum, and I incorporate the jobs to be done at the intersection of the pains and gains. So here you can see the spectrum, and in the middle, you have this black line that indicates the jobs to be done. Okay, so let's start off with the pain side of the spectrum, because right by the intersection, you have some kind of problem or obstacle that your potential client, your ideal client, is trying to overcome. Now, problems or obstacles in and of themselves aren't inherently bad. It's a consequence of those that are. So, a consequence of not being able to solve a problem or overcome an obstacle is that somebody might become frustrated, frustrated, or experience some other negative emotions. It might spill out into the real world. It might be affecting their job. It might be affecting their life. So there's some kind of negative situation, maybe an embarrassment. And they might also have the ruminations around this problem not being solved and it causing some bad thing that to happen in the future. So that you can think about maybe some anxiety or worries that they've got about that problem or obstacle not being solved. And so I find this spectrum quite helpful because you can see that you can drill down into the pains from problem to frustration to negative situation, anxiety, and worries. And we'll come back to how we can use this to design our offer. But that's basically the spectrum on the pain side of things. Looking at the spectrum on the gain side of things, well, if you want the job to be done, then a particular gain to do that is you want to give them know-how. Once they have know-how and they've practiced this for a while, people are going to develop skills and new behaviors. Enacted for long enough, you get some positive results. Oops. That's an L, that's a T. Results. And those results contribute to some sort of goal or aspiration. And so oftentimes what happens is, as experts, we can get fixated on this part of the spectrum. We look at problems, we recognize what they need to know and be able to do so they could do their jobs. But we're missing out on all this rich context on the other side of the spectrum. So this is the transformation spectrum, but you can't just show up to a potential client and then draw them this spectrum. You need something a bit more of a tool, something a bit more refined that can help you with your outside in thinking, especially because as we've been going through this, you have probably you've probably correctly recognized that your potential clients, your ideal clients, might have a lot of different problems that you can't solve, and they might have a lot of different gains that they want to achieve that again are out of your wheelhouse. So how do we work with this? Cue the Big Five framework. So let me walk you through each one of the Big Five elements because they are very simple to understand, but they're not always so obvious. So first of all, the first element is your avatar. This is the representation of your ideal client. Now, you do want to be quite specific with this. It's not a demographic, it's not an organization, it's a particular person with a context. We will map out the context in a bit more detail here. So if you are working at B2B, business to business, you want to be identifying the specific person in that business that has a problem and is a decision maker that you can frame an offer around. So you have your avatar, and this avatar is going to have a problem, a specific problem or an obstacle, right? So problem is the second piece of the Big Five. This is not a general struggle. It's that specific thing that's getting in their way. Now, if they have lots of different problems, you want to find out what they are, rank them to see what the most pressing problem is. And the way we can figure out what the most pressing problem is to figure out what the consequences are of that problem or of those problems. Now, the consequences are the deeper pains that you will get further down the spectrum. It's the stuff that happens down here. So a problem can cause a frustration. So that's a particular pain. It could be a frustration here. It could be a negative situation, or it could be some sort of anxiety. Now, the reality is it's probably all of those things, but the problem that causes the most severe pain is going to be the most urgent one for someone to solve. And of course, you have to figure out whether you can solve that problem or not. But that's basically the how pain and problem fit together when it comes to Big Five. And on the other side of the spectrum, you have your gains. So you have the first bit of gain, so it's an outcome, right? So you have some sort of outcome, and outcomes can be know-how. So a one-off workshop can give people know-how. You might teach them something, they might create some sort of output, like a deliverable, an action plan, something like that. But that's something that's usually more of a flash in the pan. It's done once you deliver the service. But if you can have an outcome that embeds a new skill or a new behavior, then that ultimately is a little bit more valuable because it's going up the value scale for the gains. And if you can help your clients achieve a particular result, so it's maybe a result in their lives, or it might be in a B2B context, help them achieve some sort of KPI or OKR or whatever it is that they do in their business, then that becomes an even more valuable problem to solve or a more valuable outcome to deliver, which means that the value of your service can be more expensive. But essentially, all of these things, all of these outcomes, so know-how, skills, results, they all need to contribute to some sort of aspiration. So that's the fifth part, aspiration. Aspiration. There you go. Now, I know that this might seem very obvious, and even if you haven't constructed a transformation spectrum or put things into these big five buckets, it is something that you probably feel like it resonates with the way you approach things. And yet, I still see a lot of people fall into a few traps. And in particular, one of them is really focusing in on the problem and outcomes. I kind of alluded to this earlier, but when you do this and you don't specify a specific avatar or a specific person you seek to serve, then it's really difficult to figure out what the contextual pain or the contextual aspiration is for your services because it's untethered from a person that you want to help. And so for me in the past, when I would say things like, I work with people, teams, and organizations, I had no ability to really figure out what it meant to live down here or live up here for the people that were signing off my proposals. But when people knew me, they could do that thinking themselves. They could join those dotted dots. But for people that didn't know me, they had to do the heavy lifting themselves, or they just didn't make the connections at all. So remember, it's that context and relevance that really matters. When we were talking about the outside in approach using this diagram, the outside of these circles is trust. And when it comes to building trust with people that don't know you, a key part of that is for you to understand their context and be able to articulate that to them so that they get that you get them, right? And that's how you can work your way down to you and why you're relevant, you showing the evidence and the precision that you have that your service and what you do with your offer is built for them specifically. So for me, since 2023, my ideal client avatar here is self-employed leadership coaches, consultants, or facilitators who are genuine experts in their craft. Now, the problem that they have is that they don't have a clear and compelling offer or a repeatable way to find and convert clients. And the pain that causes is that their pipeline is unpredictable and inconsistent. That's a negative situation. And there's a low-level chronic financial dread that lives in the background and some private shame. I know that's what I experienced. And a big worry that they have which is the same as my worry, is that they have to go and find a job again. We don't want that. So instead, what my business partner and I do is we help them with an outcome that is a repeatable, non-icky sales system built around a clear and compelling offer, which we see as a first real point of leverage in their business. And that works towards their aspiration, their goal of having a sustainable business, doing work they love with that freedom and flexibility that they went self-employed to create in the first place. Now, once you have these 5 elements clear, your positioning and your messaging starts to resonate beyond people that know you because you're building it from their world, not yours. Outside in, not inside out. A top tip before I wrap up this video is the best way to figure out the big 5 isn't just to make it up or make assumptions. The best way to do this is to go and speak directly with your ideal clients and grab the insights from their mouths, their words, use their language, because this is what's going to make it way more resonant. So that is it. We have talked about the inside out method being good for getting work with people that already know you, not so good for people that don't know you, and how we need to flip that around and really think about the outside in approach to make sure that your services are contextual and relevant to the people you seek to serve. And for us to really think about that, we did a little bit of a mini deep dive into the customer segments from Value Proposition Design, the book, but really spent quite a bit of time thinking about how pains and gains are mapped across a spectrum and how the Big 5 framework helps you identify the specific avatar, problem, the consequence of that problem, the pain, the outcome that you can promise, and then the aspiration that that outcome helps them achieve. And that really is the crux of making sure that your offer is valuable. Now, as a side point, notice that in mapping out the Big 5 framework with your avatar, we haven't talked about how you deliver your services. If you do want to go a little bit more geeky in the approach to how you design and price offers themselves, then watch the video probably hovering around right here. Okay, that's it for me for now. I will see you in the next video.